April 14th, and I'm interviewing Bob Hallman here in Columbia, South Carolina. And Bob is a dear friend, an ally, and an attorney who's helped grow in the National Guard out of a number of jams. We're going to get to know Bob a little bit better. Thank you so much, Bob.
Yeah, thank you.
Start off by talking about where you grew up and how come you turned into such a good guy.
Born in Charlotte, but raised from the age of 8, I guess, in Greenville. We moved to Greenville, and I lived there, family of 4 children, an older sister, younger brother, and younger sister, and lived Greenville all my life, and left there to go to college, and sort of never returned.
Where'd you go to graduate school?
Wofford.
Okay. And then you went in the military before you went to law school?
Yeah, I went to Wofford, and because of ROTC, went into the military. I was in for 2 years, got out, went to the University of Georgia and got a master's degree in business, and really didn't know what I wanted to do. And my brother was in law school, and he said, "We ought to come to law school." And
where was he then?
He was at USC Law School.
USC? What years were you at University of Georgia?
69, 70. And I was in the military 67 to 69, got out, immediately went into grad school. And then from grad school, maybe the same month, graduated and went to law school.
And back up and talk about your mom and dad. I mean, what did he do? What kind would you consider them liberals? Were they churched up people, or what kind of environment did you grow up in?
No, my parents weren't political, and I don't really remember hearing anything political talked about. I would say kind of like the era, and kind of like Greenville is to a large extent, conservative. So I would say that my mom and dad were conservative. We all went to church, but we weren't churchy. You didn't hear anything church related or religious related during the week. We might have said the blessing at the dinner table.
What was his business? How did he make the money?
He was a salesman for Sunshine Biscuit Company, which make Cheez-Its, etc. And he was a regional manager for them.
And you had siblings. You had 3 siblings.
Yeah, my older sister's 3 years older roughly, and my brother's 2 years younger. And because he didn't go in the military, then he passed me by, graduating from Wofford, and went to law school.
What prompted you to go in the military? Were you ROTC in college and got something?
I was ROTC.
So you went in as a first lieutenant?
Yeah, second
lieutenant. Where were you stationed?
Fort Hood, Texas for a year, and Thailand for a year.
That's Killeen, Texas, right? I mean, that's
Fort Hood. Sure was. Yeah.
That was one of the coffee houses.
Oh, okay.
Probably by 1969 or 70. So were you there? What year were you in Killeen?
I was there 67, June 67, June 68.
Probably right before it happened, because the UFO was the first coffee house. But the one in Texas, the one in Killeen, I think it was called Shelter Half. And you know what a shelter half is, right?
Nope.
It's a poncho that is half of a tent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't recall the term.
Well, you probably didn't have to tote your shelter half.
But I didn't see a lot of Killeen, because it was, military was pretty revved up with, was it Detroit? Is that where the riots were in? Yeah. And so for a few months, I lived on an airstrip waiting to be flown up there. They sent part of the 1st Armored Division, but didn't send our part of the 2nd Armored Division. So I didn't have to go.
So you're in the Army, not the Air Force?
Right, the Army.
Okay.
But transport planes would have been what?
So you came back to South Carolina. Folks are still in Greenville. You went to law school.
Is that bad? The light? Is it okay?
Well, yeah, you got stripes across your face now.
Yeah, I'm trying to get out of it. I thought this would be good.
Well,
I'd have, let me see.
it was better before. That's good.
That okay?
Yeah.
So what did you ask me? I apologize.
Talking about you're moving to Columbia and going to law school. Who'd you meet? Who was in your class? What are your recollections of that? What kind of environment was it? 60, what are we now? 60 what?
We're 70, September 70. Yeah.
So I was still getting kicked around at the university then.
Okay. And I look back on it and just kind of wonder how I was so apolitical, if you will, because I look back at the events that were occurring and I was just not tuned in. It wasn't a matter of being against something. It just wasn't, I didn't educate myself. And so when I came to Carolina Law School and pretty quickly met Lewis Pitts, because Lewis had a motorcycle and I had a motorcycle. That was my sole means of transportation for 3 years, was riding my bike. And so he and I became fast friends, and he really was quite an impact in impacting my view of the world and opening my mind up.
And what you didn't have a Harley then, did you?
No, I had a 350, a 350 Honda, I think.
All right. So 4 years, 3 years, how long did it take you to get through law school?
3 years.
And tell me who was in that class, because I consider that class, if I had not been, basically I make it up to say that I chose the ethical path and went to prison instead of law school, but I would have been in that class with you and Pitts had I not taken the road less traveled. But I consider that class to be, the mold was broken after that. Amazing, amazing people in there that stepped up and did things. You're one of them that I didn't really appreciate. I'm humbled looking back at the effort that you and Delgado and Pitts and Bruck and that Bob Guile and that class put into the work that I was doing, because it was relevant to them. Talk about your buddies there.
There were a bunch of, there are a bunch of people in the class that became judges in South Carolina. And I don't know whether that's a badge of honor or not, but a bunch of capable people. And some of the people that sort of stand out were guys that kind of people I know. I don't know that I'd ever been around or didn't really realize it, but just people who were the sons of lawyers and well-known people, like Gedney Howe and those kind of people. And so I don't really remember that many people that stand out. I just don't. I guess it's just a long time ago. To say Bob Guile was in my class, I don't know that, because one of the things that happened, Brett, the law school got so big, they admitted something like 300 freshmen, and the school wasn't big enough. And so they divided the class in half. And so literally half the class never saw the other half of the class. So
I didn't know that.
There were half the class that I never met.
So we'll wrap up the law school experience. But you went into private practice, and what were your thoughts? You had an opportunity to criminal law, civil law, public defenders. What track did you take out of law school?
When I was a freshman, I wanted to get experience, and so I went and applied for a clerkship with Matthew Perry, and he hired me as a clerk, and I clerked with him for 2 summers. And the summer after my senior year, my 3rd year, he hired me on. I was the only person in his huge, long practice that was ever his clerk. He never had a clerk before, and he never had associate before.
But so you were, when did you discover Grow? I mean, we didn't get Grow up out of the ground until probably the early mid-70s. We're meeting in Bob Giles' house as like a study group, but we got that building in '77. And I don't know the first time I reeled you in to help. Do you?
I've tried to remember the early memories. It seems like with you and Grow were when Lynn and I were getting together, and that wasn't until '86. I'm not sure if I guess you and I knew each other before then, but
sure.
I'm having a hard time remembering.
The Grow v. Campbell case was, I think, in '84. And you were you
87.
It was '87?
I think so, yeah. Seems like it was.
Anyway, the Bob, I don't know if you had a chance to look at Bob Giles' interview, but
no,
you and Bob worked on that Grow v. Campbell case together.
Yeah, I do remember some things about it, sure.
Well, it's been a real significant case that essentially picked up the Edwards VSC case in '61 and made the ruling that came out of the Grow v. Campbell was making the public property more accessible to the public. That you have to be you don't have to have permission to be able to be on public property, and that you can't be thrown off of public property unless you're doing something illegal. So it basically moved South Carolina into the era of reserving use just to avoid conflict, scheduling, not permission. And so that's something I've been doing for decades now, explaining to police and citizens. No, you don't need a permit. You have a permit. It's called the Constitution. But that was work that you did, and you need to wrap yourself in that mantle. But and also the Occupy case, when the occupiers were arrested, they cited the Grow case, and they won. They won a $10,000 piece settlement from Nikki Haley. But the one that I'm really interested in, you hopefully having some memories of, is the National Guard case in front of Charles Simon.
You know, I remember being involved, and I remember being down there. Is that the rally where that famous musician was there? What's his name?
Jackson Browne.
Yeah, Jackson Browne was there. But I was just on the periphery. I was just, one of the people attending all those meetings. It was interesting and I enjoyed it. But then sort of coming out of that, I was asked to help when Simons, when they applied to Simons to enjoin us from protesting, enjoin us from being there. And which just sort of sounds ludicrous, but Simons didn't think so. So
take it to Richmond.
He called a hearing for the purpose of issuing that order at the request of the government. And we had a hearing, and I think Danny Sheehan was there, and I'm struggling to remember who else was there.
Well, Lewis and you and Danny are the ones I remember. There may have been others, but I distinctly remember the judge calling your name. Do you recall that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Simons and I had quite a history over the years. I did a lot of federal criminal work, and I considered him fairly brutal to people in the courtroom. And golly, you have a hard time speaking ill of someone, but he just wasn't a good man. He wasn't a good judge. He wasn't a nice man. And so he and I had some real pitched battles in the courtroom. Good. Because you're arguing against the government's motions and all that, but you end up jousting with Simons. And so he didn't like me and knew that I didn't favor him. And in that hearing, Danny Sheehan was the lead lawyer and was presenting our case. all the lawyers were prepared, but I had not anticipated presenting part of the argument. And he just sort of shut Danny down because he didn't want to hear from anybody. And he just shut Danny down. He said, I see Mr. Hallman sitting there. He always likes the sound of his own voice. I'll hear from you, Mr. Hallman. So I got up and continued our argument, at which time he then made that ruling. And the part that I like is the ink didn't get dry on it before we had lawyers at the Fourth Circuit who had him reversed. He literally was reversed before midnight.
That day. I didn't remember the time frame, but what I do remember is the headline in the newspaper the next day: federal judge bans demonstration.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what they were after. I mean, it was
yeah, but it's my recollection. That's the way I choose to recall it, that he was slammed down the same day.
Yeah, I knew that it was really quick, and it probably had something to do with Shaheen and Danny and his connections.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I didn't have anything to do with it. They had other lawyers that prepared briefs and motions and filed up there.
Did you know anything about the Christic Institute? That's who Lewis had been working with, and that was Shaheen's big thing.
Yeah, I didn't really know that much. I would see Lewis socially, and he would come down and stay with me, and I knew they were jousting around the country and various things. I think that's how he ended up in Oklahoma. He went out there for the Karen Silkwood case. Mm-hmm. Do you know whether that's so? I think that's the reason he ended up out there.
That's when he first started working full time with the Christic, and then he went on with the Ollie North stuff with the Contras, and that's how the Christic Institute. They had a slap suit. I don't remember what SLAP stands for. If you can tell the audience what a slap suit is, but it's basically a mechanism in which a legal team can be found liable for presenting a case and arguing a case that should not be presented. And they were hit with like $1.5 million fine by some right-wing judge in Florida for pursuing the case of arms. That was the drugs for arms, and that was with the Contras that we all know. Ollie North actually got convicted on later, but that was a very shorthand version of the Christic Institute's rise to fame and the diminution.
I don't recall much, and I wasn't involved directly or indirectly. Lewis would come through town and stay with me, and would tell me a bunch of stuff about what he was doing and head
romantic, on. And did you know Bob Warren?
Yeah, Bob was in our class at law school.
And he's older than all of us, right? Bob was, I don't know why he was in your class.
Pardon?
Bob was older than his peer group.
Yeah, and I don't, that might have been why, he started law school later, but he was in our class.
Yeah, and he, I guess he passed a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But before he did, there was a wonderful settlement in regards to the work that he'd been doing for years and years and years about the people that were had cancer or other radiation-related diseases at the bomb plant. They pushed the date back that people could apply without having to go through a bunch of stuff.
Bob Warren was a prince. He really spent his life helping other people. He truly did.
So Becky wanted me to ask you if you have some kind of understanding of any peculiarity of law, the practice of law in South Carolina. I told her, I mean, there's Moordock families and good old boys in all these southern states for sure, probably northern states too. But Bob, do you think practicing law in South Carolina is different than in other places?
I doubt it's any different than many places any other place in the South. And I think when you get into people with money and people with power, I doubt there's a lot of difference. But the way we elect judges in South Carolina.
Talk about that.
Well, it's just that, and I don't know that I think judges elected by the people,
I
that
don't think
doesn't,
that's. I
that
mean,
doesn't,
in Texas, it takes, you can run and take money and get elected. You take money from the crooks you're supposed to prosecute. So
yeah,
I agree with you. It's a sticky wicket. But the legislature, unless you're a Supreme Court judge, every 10 years you come back up before them. And if you perturb the legislature, you may not get your seat. Now,
yeah.
and you do know that Charles Simons, the gentleman that you were tortured to have to say something not nice about, was Strom Thurmond's law partner.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. He had his own courthouse. He had a courthouse in Aiken,
Yeah.
and the only one that had that courthouse. And there was a famous people's artwork. Are you aware of that behind
Oh,
his, that he had curtains built to cover?
Is he the one that did that? Because that was the first cover of the first point that we did, was that mural that we knew was covered up by the judge, but we didn't know it was Simons. Oh, that adds fuel to my fire of not liking Charles.
Yeah, because he was the judge that was there that I'm aware of, then I'm assuming it was him. I know he would.
Well, that was a WPA project. That would have been in the 30s.
Yeah, but I don't know. It was his courtroom and it was covered.
Well, we're gonna have a field trip. We're gonna go back down there and pull that curtain back. Have you seen it? Have you seen the image?
I think I've seen a picture of a photo of it. I haven't. Yeah.
Well, it's pretty stunning. It's this very large black person with like machine guns at the feet and all. It's like, oh, yes, it's quite something. So
are they using that courthouse? Do you know whether they use that courthouse anymore?
Yes, they are. They are still. And yeah, well, we had a field trip coming. And have you ever been to the bomb plant?
No.
There's a whole generation of folks that don't know. South Carolina's largest employer. There's more people working there than anywhere else since 1950.
I've been in the free speech area at the bomb plant, and that's about it.
As close as you need to be, sir. So have you hung up your shingle completely?
Oh yeah, I retired in 17.
What did you think of Lewis Pitts going to the extreme that he did to have his lawyerness purged from his being?
Yeah, that's my buddy. You know, he's gonna speak his views, and he didn't want to be connected to them at all. And they had no provision for it. He had to sue them to
tell people who's the them Lewis sued to quit being a lawyer.
Yeah. He didn't want to be retired or whatever they called it up there, but there was no provision for someone to terminate the bar.
So he sued the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember who his defendant was, but yeah.
Well, essentially, it was them that had to make the decision, and so he litigated before them. Yeah. But now I want you to make sure that I'll let you know the date that Lewis is coming to talk about what he does so well is the history of corporations.
Okay.
From the time that the founding fathers warned against them, and till the time that they're now have citizenship rights, and they are people, and they can yes, they have more rights than most of us do. Oh, so yeah. And so I appreciate your time and all, and I want you to not be a stranger with it. And it's a really pivotal element of time of history, not just in Columbia, not just in South Carolina, not just in America, but globally. It really did change. There's so many things that were happening here that Jimmy Burns had a role in, and he was the assistant president, and the dropping of the bomb in Hiroshima and the Red Scare and all of that stuff. It kind of fits together into what we refer to and what Gelman refers to as the domestication of the civil rights movement. It had been a militant, multiracial, class-conscious movement from the time in the early 1900s. 1905 was when Du Bois started the Niagara movement, up until they dropped the hammer, and they dropped the hammer after World War II with the Red Scare. And Jimmy Burns was the author of the Red Scare. Jimmy Burns was the one that had his finger on the bomb. And we moved seamlessly from blaming the carpetbaggers coming down and telling the Negroes they was unhappy to blaming the communists. So we needed, you got to be an other, got to blame things on somebody else coming down here and stirring stuff up, outside agitators.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, my brother. Something else to say?
No, I can't think of it. I don't know that I've moved the needle much here in history as far as recalling for you, but
well, I appreciate it, and I just again, you're one of the people that has stepped up and helped me. Oh, I can put something out here that I won the case. You remember, and this isn't in the time frame that this particular book is in, but we're working on a Grow book that just probably runs up to the beginning of the Progressive Network in '96. But do you remember when I was arrested for refusing to go to the free speech zone? I think it was in '04. Bush was president, and at the airport. And you were one of the attorneys, and they cracked on me big time. And the prosecution lied, and the prosecutor was Strom Thurmond Jr. And they told me I had to come off my guns, and I was this violent person, and I had all these outstanding charges, which wasn't true. Everything had been either pardoned or won or dismissed. Mm-hmm. And I remember bringing my little collection of weapons into your office, and your eyes got real big, and you said, "Oh, those are real guns." And so, yes, sir.
I have no recollection of that. You brought guns to my office?
Yes. No, they made me. They said you've got to turn your guns in. And so I won't take them to Bob Hallman. You perhaps didn't want to remember that, but my shotgun and my pistol were in your office for until they apologized and said, "Oh, well, we're sorry. You go back and get them." And they're still where they were. They're in my bedside table and in the closet.
Yeah, yeah. Brett, do you or the group that you mentor, is it, do y'all own Majestica's house now?
No, the city owns Majestica's house. They bought it basically out of bankruptcy because a woman who bought it kept not making payments on it. And the city and Blue Cross Blue Shield put the money up, but the city owns it now. And Historic Columbia Foundation is the steward that contractually, deal with the city to manage the thing. And that's what it needs. I mean, I wouldn't want to be responsible for it because I ain't going to be here that much longer, and I hope the house will. And now the partner that Historic Columbia looked for, and we knew that it was probably coming. We were there for 12 years with the understanding that someday you're going to have to leave. And the partner came into 2019. Was the National Park Service. And so the National Park Service has partnered with this, put a bunch of money into it. And it's a teaching, there's words for it, but it's not just a static place, a museum. They're doing classes about the civil rights movement and all that. So it's really good and progressive, and the people that did it are friends of ours. But they're government funded. They can only go so far. They can't bite the hand that feeds them. Well, next door, literally, physically sharing a driveway between the old Lexington Dry Cleaners building and Majestica's house. We bought the building adjacent to her because we saw this coming. We worked out the deal with the guy that owned the building, who owns the No Name restaurant, and moved in right before the pandemic. And we've been. So
that's where your office is now?
Yep. And we've been taking this last 2 years to get the building that was just a giant clothes hanger, because people dropped dirty clothes off and picked up clean clothes. Yeah. And so it's a fairly soulless structure, a commercial structure built in 1960. Nothing like the old Grow building, which had tremendous amount of character just falling down around your ears.
It really did.
Yeah. And so anyway, we're looking forward to having movies with some regularity. We just got giant television, and we're going to have movie night. We're going to be able to have a broadcast studio for our school. And it's just, the school has been so well received that it's the thing that I'm going to focus on and try and pass the ambulance chasing of whatever the hot issue is today off to the young'uns that are coming along that can do that. Somebody needs to do that, but if all you're doing is reacting, you don't have time to act to stop that which it is that is the problem. You're reacting to symptoms as opposed to the cause.
Yeah.
And that's not
Well,
radical.
you just keep on plugging, I guess you're selfish.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I apologize for having so much fun. And poor Becky is ready to go back to her art studio. And she's wrapping up her 5th book now that the county's paying for. And just the Richland County Conservation Commission. And we're lifting up history, and we keep kind of offending people, but history is it's not all pleasant, And we now have just the most bizarre circumstance with this people trying to deny that there's any kind of racial systemic problems with our Constitution or the U.S. Constitution. That's those of us that pay a little bit of attention know that that's not true.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sticking with it.
It ain't over yet, Bob. It ain't over.
Yeah.
And so we'll be seeing you soon, and you certainly will hopefully come to the thing Monday. And we know where you live.
I'll try. Take care, Brad.
Thank you, sir. Take care.